Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Guys, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different on my channel. I'm actually going to have a guest star, so to speak, come in and host today's video. And who that's going to be is my buddy Ron Grundy, who is up in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. Now, about a year ago, I think it was, we actually had Ron do a video where he is working on restoring a Kearney Trecker Model 1H horizontal milling machine. He did a video. You guys seem to really kind of like it. And Ron has actually filmed another episode kind of in that project. This winter, he has been gotten kind of back to working on that machine and is trying to get it going. So a little bit about Ron before we get into this. Ron actually spent 30 years of his career working for Kearney Trecker, the people that made these machines. He went to work for them in the early 1960s, right after he got out of the Navy. And then he basically spent most of his career, about 30 years, working for Kearney Trecker. When he was originally hired, he was hired as a scraping hand out in their shop building brand new machines. He apprenticed under some of the old German scrapers that had been there, some of them for 40 years before he even started in the 1960s. Learned that skill, learned how to do basically building brand new machines. Throughout his career, he spent a lot of different time in different departments at K&T doing different things. At one time, he was actually over the department that rebuilt machines. So you could send an old machine up there and they would rebuild it. He spent a good bit of time on the road doing rebuildings in factories and so forth, and actually managed the parts department for a while. So he really knows these machines inside and out, all the way from building them to rebuilding them to selling parts for them and everything else when he was at K&T. He is, like I said, working on a Model 1H, which is very similar to this mill. This is a 3H mill that I have. It's just a much smaller version. And he's going to be going through kind of his process and talking about the things that's going on with it. Now, I will tell you guys before we switch over there to it, he had, I think, his nephew come in to film it. And like so many younger people do, they did it with their phone, and they did it kind of in the up and down in the portrait mode rather than turning it sideways in the landscape mode. So the video is going to be up and down. I know that's not ideal for YouTube, but the content I think is worth seeing. So definitely want you guys to get a chance to see that. He's going to be hopefully sending along a few more videos in the near future, continuing to work on this machine now that he's kind of back into working on it over the winter months up there. So we're going to go over to Ron. Y'all enjoy, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit of something about restoring these old milling machines.
We're going to take a look at this machine this morning, our little number one that I've been working on for a while. And I started hand scraping the knee. I've taken the table and saddle off. You can see where I've been scraping on the knee here. I'm going to do a little bit of a demo, just hand scraping this. Got my scraper here. This is a Sandvik, okay, with a carbide tip, a Cormorant Sandvik. You can buy them off of the internet. I see them on the internet. I've had this one for a long time. This one here is old school, and this one I made. This is made out of a blank file, good steel blank file. Swedge it out, harden it, and when you harden it, you got to make sure you don't get it too hard to crack it. If you've got somebody that's pretty good at doing a little blacksmithing for you, and then hold it flat on a stone, file it flat, stone it nice and flat, and when you sharpen it, a 20 degree angle. 20 degrees this way, 20 degrees this way. You should have a line right down through the center. And when you lay it on the machine to scrape, you'll see, she's pretty good, does a pretty good cut. I do prefer to use the carbide. The carbide lasts a little bit longer. I get a little deeper cut. Now what I'm doing here, you can see how I'm cutting this. I'm doing nice short, kind of wide cuts. The first cut, I'll go across the whole top of this knee, kind of a close cut, just like that. And you can see on the other side of the way here, where I have marked it, I use a 2-foot round and sharp straight edge, and I put bluing on it, marked it. Of course, it's going to be wore here, it's going to be wore here. So we're scraping all of the bluing here, all the high spots. We're going to be scraping it till we get it nice and flat. So we're scraping it with our hand scraper, getting it, you know, just working back and forth, scraping it with our hand scraper, okay? Over here, if you'll look over here, I've got my surface plate, my straight edge, okay? I've got my bluing. Here's my bluing. I've used Permatex. This one is a Permatex. This one is a Loctite bluing. I like to use that type of paste bluing. The dauber that I use is just a flat piece of leather on a little piece of wood glued on there. And of course I'll use it, put the bluing on my straight edge, make sure everything is nice and clean. Come over here, mark my knee with my straight edge, keep going back and forth till I got it nice and flat. You want to have her just nice and flat. The reason you're doing that, first of all, is for your geometry and alignment, okay? Secondly, the scraping marks in here leave little divots, and it'll hold oil, okay? This will hold oil as your slide is going back and forth. It'll hold oil in there, okay? You want to have that. And I want to point out something else. On the end of this, right here, this first 1/2 inch, you can really relieve that because the saddle don't come out that far anyway, so you can relieve that. Okay, so that's as far as I've got with scraping the top of the machine now. This is a little number 1H, your pulley bracket, your pulley here, okay, your main drive clutch. Underneath there, this is your oil pump for the spindle, and for the gear is inside of the column, okay, and then this is your gear drive, your main drive going down for your knee. This is actually your bracket here, your drive bracket. Your pump for the knee is right in here, and these you can drop right out. There's just screws that hold it. Drop it down. You can take all of this off, take your pulleys off, take your coolant pump off, take this off. I'll have to do that when I take the knee off, because I'm going to have to take the knee off to scrape the dovetails. When I scrape the dovetails, I've got a checking fixture here that I indicate from this positive. This is the positive side. This is your give side. So I got to scrape that flat, and parallel. I'll indicate it parallel, okay? That's what I'm doing here. Your motor is down in here. Here's your coolant pump. So I'm going to walk around the machine. This is little number 1H. Was originally sold in 1940 to General Electric X-Ray in Chicago. And the machine took a lot of use. So when we go around here, we're going to see the inside of the column. You can look at all your gears, make sure your oiling is proper here. When you take the gearbox out, I got a couple of studs that slides right out. You got to raise this up, raise it up so you're disengaged, and then pull the gearbox out. And remember, little safety tips here. Safety glasses, safety shoes, and be very careful. This equipment is heavy. Some of this stuff is pretty heavy coming out of here. So you'll see what I have here is the units that I talked about, these machines being built in units. This is your speed gearbox. You can see the gears back there, inspect everything. Here's your feed distribution box. You can see all of the handles and everything are still on it. It comes right out when you take all of the side trips off of the side of the machine. You take the trips out so you can crank it right out of there. It cranks right straight out. Then you can slide your table off after you drop your crossfeed bracket. You can slide your saddle off after the table is off. Table comes off first and the end brackets. Now if you look at the saddle, you'll see these holes here. They originally had felts in them for oiling. Now the oiling system on this, the guys have called me about the oiling systems. These are all wick systems. Okay, so you've got plugs all over the place where this thing is plugged. You pull them plugs out of there, got to clean out all of those oil galleries, re-wick all of this stuff, bring all the wicking up here. It's really a long process and difficult process to do that re-wicking, you know, but you can buy the wicking probably from McMaster Car. Now I've got an oil pump up here. This is basically what your oil pump looks like. This is a little bigger from a bigger machine. Got a couple of gears in here. Very easily rebuilt grind surface. Grind these about 1,000 under. Run it, you know, so you make sure you've got everything that it doesn't overheat, that doesn't pick up on anything, and it'll pump oil great. So then we come over here. Like I said, we've got our we inspected everything. Now my next step that I'm going to do with this machine is finish up the top. Then I'm going to take the knee off. Take the knee off. Going to do all of the scraping on the column, on the back of the knee. I'll lay the column right down. Okay, lay the column down. Polish the overarms. My hope for this machine is that it goes to the West Dallas Historical Society. I want to just make it look really nice. It's a good example of a machine that was built by Kearney Trecker in the very early part of World War II, and then the production really ramped up during World War II. They made 800 to 1,000 of these things every month. So this machine is a neat example. Small machine, should be able to get it into the Historical Society if they want it. Okay. Some of you guys that do the Bridgeport mills, a lot of guys have Bridgeport mills. I've actually made a plate. Here's a plate for the Bridgeport to slide on top of the knee and mark the knee and do all of the dovetails and stuff on the Bridgeports. Then I'll add tercite. This is tercite. I'll add to the gibs. If I have a gib that's gone in too far, I'll add tercite on it, bring it back to standard. Now, one thing I want to tell you guys about these gibs, here's a saddle gib for this machine. Okay, I'm going to add tercite to this. What I'll do is mix up two-part epoxy, score the back of this tercite, clean everything up, make sure I've got a good cut on the gib, glue it, bond it on, put bonding on both sides, glue it, put a weight on it, clamp it down, let it set for 24 hours, okay? Now the tercite can be bought from Machine Tool Service and Training Group out of Waukesha. Keith out there will give you all of the information on the tercite that you need and the glue and stuff. Keith will be able to sell that to you. So, and if you have any questions, he's the guy to go to about bonding it on. I use a two-part epoxy and just glue it on. The other thing I want to say is that I have right here in my possession, I have a demagnetizer. Now, demagnetize the gibs. It makes a big difference if you take the demagnetizer and you run the gibs across the demagnetizer. It takes the stress out from years and years. The gibs bend, you know, they're from clamping and wear and stuff like that. And when you take them and try to scrape them, they're really squirrely. If you run them across that demagnetizer a couple of times, it makes it a lot easier to lay it on a plate, scrape it nice. Like I said about demagnetizing the gib, it makes it way easier to scrape. Now, I laid the gib on there, had bluing on my plate, and when I scrape it nice and flat, it pivots here, and it pivots here. So you know the gib is nice and flat on the back side. Just waltz it around there a little bit. You can see the marking all the way through it. All you need to do is make sure the backs of these gibs are flat. You don't need to have fly shit bearing on there, you know, I mean, just nice and flat, okay? And then add your chur sight to it and you're in business, all right? So that's about all I've got today. You kind of know what I'm doing, where I'm going. And the last video that I make, I hope to have this thing together and show you what it looks like when I get done with it. That's what I'm telling you now. I hope, God willing, I live that long. I'll be 80 my next birthday, so, and that's next month. So I don't know. Hopefully we'll get this done before I'm in milling machine heaven. Well, thanks, Dan, and fellows, boys and girls.